I've always had a complicated relationship with a certain genre of movies, and this genre is our revenge. This type of violence was a part of cinema probably since its very inception in some way or another. You can find examples of it in any basic movie genre, including comedy, but the films that rile people up the most focus solely on the essay and the subsequent revenge for it. These movies usually follow roughly the same storyline. You are introduced to a female protagonist, she's attacked by one or more men, she then goes through some sort of transformation and avenges herself on those who have hurt her. Once the woman is done with the revenge, the story ends. Sometimes, if the woman is killed or for whatever reason is unable to exact vengeance, somebody else close to her takes the role of the avenger. Personally, I've always had a hard time making it through sexually violent scenes without closing my eyes, turning away, or straight up fast forwarding through it all. And I feel like a hypocrite sometimes because I love horror and I have no issue in watching people regardless of gender being tortured on screen. The gorier the better. But I have come to the conclusion that it's easier for me to distance myself from this type of gore because there is a small possibility of it happening to me, compared to essay, which is a looming fear over any woman's head, I believe. Might depend on where you live, but women's safety is a big issue and it dictates how we as women behave in a society. So my brain automatically puts me in the situation I'm witnessing. I think my first exposure to our revenge happened with the remakes of I Spit on Your Grave and The Last House on the Left. And I only remember bits and pieces of those movies because I couldn't stomach it and I was a young teen. When you watch something like this for the first time, you think to yourself, what kind of sick pervert would make such a thing in the first place? Or is it necessary to show such an attack on screen at all? For example, the director of Irreversible, Gaspar Noé, justified his infamous red tunnel attack that lasts 9 minutes by saying, quote, "Because the subject of the movie was assault, I said it has to be as powerful as it can be, to be disgusting enough to be useful. If you do a movie about a topic like this and don't show it, you hide the point. The thing is that if you show it in a disgusting way, you help people to avoid that kind of situation. Like in Clockwork Orange, when they show images of terror to Malcolm McDowell to stop him doing those kinds of things. It's useful that it's shown." End quote. So some believe that revealing it as it is helps open people's eyes to how serious and devastating violence towards women is. It's supposed to disgust you and make you feel very uncomfortable in all sorts of ways. Seems reasonable, but then another question arises. Who is the target audience? There are a couple of stories about the screenings of such movies like I Spit on Your Grave and Miss 45, during which some men actively cheered for the attackers, and then the same men got quiet when the revenge finally began. And it's cool and all, but do we really believe that these people with a skewed moral compass change their opinion after watching a movie which presents a fantasy? No victim is going to plot revenge against their assailant in real life. Very slim chance. And let's not pretend that people don't cut out these graphic scenes and post them on YouTube, porn sites, and other platforms, which completely diminishes whatever message the director tried to convey in the first place. So the point that somehow a graphic essay scene can help avoid it in real life or change a person's attitude towards it is beautiful in theory, but doesn't hold up in reality in my eyes. A thing that sometimes annoys the hell out of me is the posters. The original I Spit on Your Grave caused significant controversy and backlash for glorifying violence. The director later explained that he was inspired to write the script after helping a young woman who had been attacked by 2 men at a park in New York City. So once more, the whole point of the movie was to showcase the real horrors of such situation. And while people to this day still argue whether the main female lead is objectified or not, it's pretty clear that the image on the movie's poster was meant to titillate potential audience. You see a headless, faceless woman with her ass cheeks out. And remakes, which by the way involve the original director, all 4 of them, are even more tactless. However, depending on the country, the ass is sometimes covered. There's another big issue with our revenge films. If you choose to show essay in all its glory, how do you do it? Many directors walk a very thin line trying to use the objectifying gaze to demonstrate how the bad guys are perceiving the female character, and at the same time signal to the viewers that the attack itself is a violation and there's nothing sexy about it. Some succeed in doing that and others not so much. Some people strongly believe that this sexualizing gaze shouldn't be there in the first place. It might give people mixed signals. We live in a sexualized culture and we're becoming more and more desensitized to certain pornographic material. Every day you scroll past it and you don't even give it a second thought. So again, a person who doesn't have the strongest morals or an average moviegoer who doesn't tend to analyze what they see on screen might look at the objectified woman and think, nice ass, instead of, wow, this director is trying to say something deep. We're looking at a woman through so-and-so eyes. Personally, I hated the movie Revenge. I had no idea the director, who is a woman, that was a big selling factor for some, used exaggerated gaze to make a certain point about our revenge movies and how they treat their female characters. It completely went over my head. Maybe I was dumb not to see it, but I found the characters and the plot so plastic and delirious that the whole thing just pissed me off. When the infamous movie Cuties came out, I immediately remembered revenge. People labeled Cuties as child exploitation and child porn, but later the female director came out and said how shooting minors in provocative clothing and poses like they were grown women was commentary on hypersexualization of young girls and how normalized it became and that you were supposed to feel uneasy, and the film was basically misunderstood. I haven't watched Cuties, by the way. I did watch a lot of videos about it. I do want to judge it for myself, so I might watch it in the future, but situations like this make you wonder how much responsibility should be put on the artist to ensure that their art is interpreted in the right way. Is this you being slow-witted or them failing at delivering their message? One more problem I have with our revenge movies is that for me at times it's very hard to experience the catharsis that everybody talks about, because no revenge can erase what occurs prior to that and what happens after it's done. Emerald Fennell, the director and writer of Promising Young Woman, had various endings in mind for her story, one of them being a positive one, if you can say so, with Cassie, the main character, killing the bad guys. However, as Emerald explained, quote, "But what happens then? The cops? Jail forever? Was that worth it? What happens after the catharsis? Your life's still ruined. There is no happy ending in any revenge." End quote. Even the final version of the ending was not what Fennell wanted. For her, the story ends with a shot of Cassie's body burning, without the justice from the police at the last minute. Of course, saying that your life is ruined is a very depressing and bold statement. No matter what you go through, you can still have a happy and fulfilling life. But when it comes to our revenge movies, it seems like they're focused so much on she's such a badass part that it almost reflects our fear to talk about SA and what it entails and how it impacts the person's life. We just want to get that quick satisfactory moment of, look, she's fine, it's done, the bad guys got what they deserved, they end. At the same time, that's the sole purpose, right? Because in real life, justice is not guaranteed. And that's why some women do enjoy these types of movies, particularly the revenge part, since it acts as a wishful fantasy, and in a weird way, it helps people process their own attacks. Yet, it's pretty clear that when the attack is not graphic, even more women appreciate such stories. For example, Miss 45 became a classic and a breath of fresh air in the genre due to the handling of its main female lead and her trauma. This movie is so much more than just our revenge story, so I'm going to talk about it in more detail. Miss 45 follows Thena, a young woman whose name derives from the Greek god of death. This is what she will become and what awaits her at the very end. Thena is mute, but her disability seems to be more psychosomatic than physical and is connected to her past. As Zoë Lund, the actress who plays her, explained, quote, "I see it as metaphoric. She can't speak. She has no voice in the world, period." End quote. Thena works as a seamstress in New York's garment district. She's the youngest among her colleagues, plus she's disabled, so she's babied a lot, and not only at work but at home too by her noisy neighbor/landlady.
You look very bad. You really do. I'm going to call the doctor.
Thena doesn't have any family, at least near her, but more than anything, she just wants to be left alone. The world of Miss 45 is not safe for women. As soon as Thena and her female colleagues get off work, they face catcalling from every corner. SA is presented as something very common. Compared to other our revenge movies where you have a build-up to the main attack, you feel like it's coming, you expect it, here it happens out of the blue, very random. Thena gets pulled into a dark alleyway by a masked stranger on her way home in broad daylight. The predator is played by the movie's director himself. Everything happens very quickly. Once the man runs away, you're left as puzzled and shocked as Thena. But it doesn't end there. As soon as she gets into the apartment, she finds a burglar there, a completely different man. And upon realizing that Thena can't talk, he decides to attack her too. This time the scene is longer, but what you notice is that the camera mainly focuses on the close-ups of the faces and not the bodies. At certain points, it almost looks like Thena's point of view. This definitely helps pull you right into the horrific situation, as opposed to when you look at it from the distance, something that other revenge movies like to do sometimes. Or when the camera lingers over the body slowly. The first attack does have a couple of shots with two bodies in the frame, but since this scene is so choppy, it gives off a different feeling. Moreover, Thena is not naked. Abel Ferrara, the director, said that not having nudity in the film was not a conscious decision. Quote, "Zoe was willing to do it. It was just a flash decision to not have it. We were aiming at a cold sexuality, a violent tone." End quote. Thena ends up killing the second assailant during the attack, which isn't typical of our revenge movies. She manages to strike him with a red glass apple twice, and then finish him off using an iron. There were a couple of moments that foreshadowed this murder. Number one, before coming home, Thena quickly stopped by a store to buy meat. Not long after that, she would dismember the burglar's corpse and put his body parts in the fridge to gradually get rid of them later. And number two, after Thena is attacked the first time, she is crouched down on the ground near the trash bins. You can notice a single apple next to her. The two objects that Thena uses as weapons are pretty symbolic. The apple obviously evokes images of Eve in the Garden of Eden and the evil queen from Snow White. At one point in the movie, Thena wears a black cloak, which also exudes those fairy tale vibes. And the second object, the iron, is Thena's primary work tool. Since Thena doesn't have a voice in the world and is pretty sheltered, it might explain why she decides not to contact the police and deal with the things on her own. Even if she could speak, I don't think she would have called for help. What differentiates Miss 45 from other movies in the genre is that Thena is not on the lookout for her first attacker. You never see him again. This is not a revenge against a specific man. It's all men. The movie doesn't rush Thena's transformation. She struggles with PTSD, she dissociates at work, she has trouble sleeping, and is averse to physical touch.
What's wrong, honey?
There's one scene that perfectly exemplifies Thena's condition. Once she's done dismembering the man's body, she decides to take a shower, and as she's in the process of unbuttoning her shirt, an imaginary man's hand grabs her breast. It's one of those moments when a viewer is expecting to see the naked chest, but instead gets a jump scare, and a reminder of what this woman has gone through. I really love this scene. Thena decides to keep the .45 caliber pistol that the burglar left behind, and this gun becomes her voice, hence the name of the movie. Violence becomes Thena's language and her way of liberating herself. But the first time Thena uses the gun, she does it to protect herself, kind of. One day, while disposing of one of many bags with a human body part, Thena is noticed by a young man who wasn't doing anything much except pester any woman who walked past him.
Hey, baby doll, pretty good today, huh?
Thinking that Thena accidentally dropped her bag, he decides to chase her through the streets just to give it back. Thena eventually gets cornered by this guy, and fearing another essay, she shoots him right in the middle of the forehead. And you can see how stunned and shaky she is. Thena immediately runs back to her apartment. In fear and disgust, she throws the bloody gun in the drawer and pukes in the toilet. This particular incident kicks off Thena's crusade against men. And her goal is not to inflict as much pain as possible, something that other revenge movies do. She just wants them gone. The gun allows her to get rid of any annoying or threatening man as quickly as possible without dirtying her own hands. It's like a fever dream because Thena, who has never used a gun before, is a brilliant assassin who never misses and has endless ammo. This really reflects the wish/fantasy which you as a woman have sometimes when you think to yourself, if only all men disappeared, or if only they had some type of night curfew, I could walk alone late at night without fear. Thena's victims range from truly despicable criminals like a gang that surrounds her one night, or a pimp who beats up his working girl, to simply obnoxious and sleazy douchebags. These men fall into the morally gray area, like an arrogant fashion photographer who makes out with his alleged girlfriend, but then the moment she leaves, flirts with Thena and her co-workers.
Sweet ladies.
He eventually leads Thena to his studio to, quote-unquote, have a test shoot. Instead, he meets his death there. Another example is a wealthy Saudi Arabian businessman who picks Thena up from the street, assuming she's a sex worker. You realize how far Thena has gone in her pursuit of justice when she stalks a young guy whose only sin is making out with his girlfriend. He manages to get away due to Thena acting too slow. It's a comedic moment, and I do like that Miss 45 has those. It's again something that differentiates it from other movies in the genre. Moreover, this moment continues into the next scene. Frustrated, Thena goes to a bar where a man confuses her inability to speak with her being an amazing listener. But Thena does seem to be invested in this man's story about his failed marriage. He caught his wife cheating on him with another woman, which really fits into the movie's sentiment about men. You can almost tell what Thena is thinking about, that maybe not all men are bad. Together with the viewer, she feels sympathy. However, as soon as the man gets to the part in which he strangles his wife's cat in revenge, Thena's rage comes back and she reaches for the gun. Now, this scene really really showcases how without her gun, Thana is the same old shy little girl. She's not invincible, and she's not a badass even though you want her to be all of those things. Without her gun, she's still a woman, and she's still physically weaker than any average man. Thana's gun jams when she tries to shoot the depressed man, and the roles are quickly reversed. The man takes the gun from her, and this is when you see the panic on Thana's face, and the only thing she does is freeze. Lucky for Thana, the man ends up pointing the gun on himself. It's funny that even Thana's neighbor's dog, which has a human name, Phil, acts like an irritating man and causes Thana a lot of trouble. Phil is attracted to the smell of the dismembered limbs that Thana keeps in her fridge, so he always tries to get into her apartment. Under the pretext of taking Phil for a walk, Thana gets rid of him. She ends up tying him to a post far from home, and you see her aiming the gun at him, but you never hear the gunshot. Only at the very end will you know what truly happened. As soon as Thana begins killing men, her appearance changes. That cold, violent sexuality is achieved with the help of the color red and the classic office-style clothing. Thana has a red cardigan and jumper, red pants. If she isn't wearing a red piece of clothing, she makes sure to have red lipstick on and red nails. Black beret and black skinny leather pants are also two of her favorite items to put on. In one of the interviews, Zoë Lund stated that she connected with Thana on a deeper level and she knew a lot about her background. Quote, "I like Thana a lot. I knew a lot about her that others didn't. That she came from a banal religious background, that her handicap was psychosomatic from way back. Her dream was to be a model, but she had no hope of leaving the sweatshop. She was very innocent. She'd seen a lot but hadn't done anything. She had a conscience, but not a whit of consciousness until she's attacked." End quote. Oftentimes in our revenge movies, you don't know much about the female protagonist. They don't really have a personality except being a victim and then a brutal avenger and vigilante. Being a woman who is attacked is their whole identity. But Thana is so much more than that. I was very surprised how easy it was to relate to her. By the end of the movie, you kind of forget that this is a story about a say. Thana becomes a symbol of any human being who has ever felt voiceless in personal or professional sphere.
Be like the other girls.
Zoë Lund generally believed that Miss 45 is as much pro-woman as it is pro-garment worker. Quote, "The film obviously is about physical assault, but it's truly, in my more elaborate view, about anyone who's been screwed over in any way. The real villain is Thana's boss, who wants to keep his women for 40 years in his service. He's the one person she sets out to kill." End quote. It is very interesting that Thana works in fashion, the industry which is aimed at women but run by men. The movie drives this point home by having Albert as Thana's boss.
What are you gawking at?
Albert clearly has more than professional feelings towards Thana, considering his inappropriate touching. I don't really believe that killing the boss was Thana's main goal, because she was pretty apathetic towards work and Albert until he started nagging her more about skipping work and not doing enough, all that. But Albert is the only man who is very close to Thana in her day-to-day life. And it makes sense that in order to reach the ultimate liberation, Thana has to get rid of him and abandon that part of her. The normal logical solution would be, of course, to report him and quit the job, but the police in Miss 45 only exist to catch and punish Thana, not save her. Moreover, the revenge and the hatred for men completely take over Thana by the end, and she sees no other way but to plan a massacre during a Halloween work party she's invited to by Albert. This becomes the climax of the film. For this office party, Thana decides to dress like a nun, with an addition of her signature red lip. This outfit is pretty symbolic and significant, since Thana is trying to reclaim her innocence, and she wants nothing to do with men. Nuns take a vow of chastity. They are single because they are married to God and the church. During the party, you're introduced to some of its guests, and the movie again makes sure to demonstrate how shady and trashy the men of Miss 45 are. One guy talks about paying money to sleep with a virgin, another tells his wife or girlfriend that he changed his mind about getting a vasectomy. At this point in the story, I'm not sure you can feel cathartic that these men are going to be killed in a couple of minutes. You understand that there is no future for what Thana has become. When I watched this movie for the first time, I truly didn't anticipate Thana's death, especially considering how she dies and at whose hand. Laurie, Thana's co-worker and friend, manages to stop the killing spree by literally and metaphorically stabbing Thana in the back. The way Laurie holds the knife in front of her crotch, like a phallic symbol, signifies that masculinity has won. This is the betrayal of a fellow woman, which forces Thana to finally speak, and the first, last, and only word she utters is sister. It's fascinating that Laurie is the one who is contrasted with Thana. She has a strong personality, she's not afraid to use her voice and tell men to F off if necessary.
Get bent!
She's a tomboy, she looks androgynous. And Thana, on the other hand, represents soft, sensitive femininity, and this type of woman loses in the end. Zoë Lund said this about Laurie and Thana's relationship. Quote, "At first, Thana has admiration for Laurie, but later she feels contempt. Laurie talks a lot, but she's hypocritical. Thana can't talk, she can't bullshit. Her only way to respond is through action, which is more honest." End quote. The ending of Miss 45 is devastating. It's sad that Thana's character thought she couldn't ask for help even from her female co-workers that truly seemed to care about her. When they hear the first gunshot at the party upstairs, where Albert took Thana to make out with her or whatnot, the first thing the women do is scream Thana's name and rush up the stairs because they're worried she's been shot. I have no doubt they would have supported Thana through any kind of hardship. The movie's closing scene hammers the final nail in Thana's coffin. Phil, the landlady's dog Thana supposedly killed, finally finds his way back home. This moment once again hints at the fact that masculinity or patriarchy, whatever you want to call it, cannot be eliminated. But it also indicates that Thana wasn't a complete monster. Laurie was capable to stop Thana only because the latter hesitated to shoot the final man, who was dressed as a bride. Which is a very ironic scene, a nod against a future wife. But it's apparent that Thana never wanted to hurt the women. She wanted to protect them, and this just makes the betrayal even more depressing. Miss 45 is definitely not a perfect movie. The original poster is the standard example of an exploitation piece, but it looks classier than I Spit on Your Grave, for instance. The poster was actually changed to be more artistic when the movie got remastered and re-released in 2013. It's evident that Zoë Lund's performance is the heart of the movie, and she was the one who made Thana so relatable. And this is why Miss 45 has such a dedicated following now among men and women. Even Abel Ferrara, the director, acknowledged that, quote, "The movie is her and embodies her. I was surprised at the time. One critic said that we made her mute in the script because she couldn't act. That was crazy." End quote. Zoë and Abel would collaborate on another movie together in 1992 called Bad Lieutenant, which Zoë co-wrote and had a minor role in. Unfortunately, Zoë Lund passed away in 1999 of heart failure due to drug use. When it comes to art and cinema, a part of me does believe that we shouldn't moralize it, because it's such a slippery slope to the overall censorship of certain topics. The films I've mentioned, they all deserve to exist, whether I like them or not. Art is not supposed to solve world's problems, it's a pure reflection of life and our attitudes towards specific issues. Those old revenge movies served their purpose. Remaking them or repeating the same stories but with different characters is unnecessary and does feel exploitative in my humble opinion. While older revenge movies seem to rely on the belief that just showing or implying the violation of consent was not enough to justify the brutal revenge and not enough to reach the catharsis, we are now witnessing many examples of subversion of the genre which prove that you don't have to show it all to make people uncomfortable in their seats. And frankly, it's kind of boring to keep telling women that they can only be angry after they go through all circles of hell.